In my recent video on the Colorado and Southern Alpine Tunnel add-on, I briefly featured the locomotive, and some rolling stock, from the clunkily named Clear Creek Old Timer Rolling Stock Pack, an older add-on from the Milepost Simulations range. I figured that I may as well give the Old Timer pack its own dedicated review, so here we are. The Clear Creek Old Timer pack was released in April 2017, and just over 9 years later, it's still available to buy on Steam for 24 New Zealand dollars at full price. I have absolutely no memory of when I bought my copy of this add-on, and forgot I even had the ruddy thing until late June 2026, when I was working on my review of the Alpine Tunnel add-on. Anyway, as its name implies, the Old Timer add-on is centered around the idea of going back in time to railroading on the Clear Creek route in the 1890s, even though the in-game Clear Creek narrow gauge route is actually set in the 1930s, thus clashing with the 1890s era rolling stock in the Old Timer pack. And now we're at the eastern end of the Clear Creek narrow gauge route. This is Golden, a place whose name I recognise as it's now home to the Colorado Railroad Museum, and has been since 1959. Anyway, there's only one locomotive included in the Clear Creek Old Timer pack, but I would argue that she is not an entirely new addition to the game. Instead, she is essentially a backdated variant of the B4D class 280 consolidation that we already had with the CCNG route itself. These consolidations were built by Baldwin in 1890 for the Denver, Leadville and Gunnison Railroad, or DNLG for short, with a total build-out of only 8 locomotives. They were originally numbered from 266 to 273, but renumbered to 63 through 70 when the DNLG was taken over by the Colorado and Southern in 1898. Between 1902 and 1903, these locomotives were reclassified as B4D and heavily rebuilt with new boilers, as well as air tanks on top of said boiler, and their last significant modifications were applied in the 1910s, when they were fitted with Ridgeway spark arresters. Seeing as they're narrow-gauge 280s, the B4Ds kind of remind me of the New Zealand Railway's P-class, even though the Ps ran on 3-foot 6-inch gauge, not 3-foot. All but 2 of the B4Ds were withdrawn by 1943, and the 2 survivors, numbers 69 and 70, were apparently sold to the US Army and worked on the White Pass and Yukon Railroad in Alaska, but were withdrawn in 1964. Sadly, none of the B4Ds have survived into preservation. Thinking back to the B4D in-game, she's a reasonably powerful locomotive for her size, and I wouldn't consider her hard to drive. If you keep the fire mass at around 780 pounds, or perhaps higher if you're hauling a longer train than 2 excursion coaches plus way car, which is what I did when I ran the consolidation on Alpine Tunnel, and keeping the boiler water level around 80 to 90%, you should have minimal trouble maintaining a high boiler pressure on the steep inclines. In my opinion, Milepost Simulations steam locomotives are neither too basic nor too advanced, just somewhere in the middle, if that makes any sense. Incidentally, when I hear the consolidation chuffing at low speed, I reckon that she sounds like she's saying "Ow la mo sa, ow la mo sa" over and over again. The DNLG consolidation may be an interesting locomotive, at least in my opinion, but there are numerous aspects of this thing that let her down somewhat. Although her textures look perfectly fine for the most part, I am not a fan of the brass textures on the whistle, bell, safety valve, some cab controls, and the smokebox number plate. In other words, the brass could have been improved with shinier/more realistic textures. Meanwhile, and much like the B4D variants from Clear Creek Narrow Gauge and Alpine Tunnel, the backdated DNLG engine has a constant thick plume of exhaust from the funnel, even when she's idling with both the blower and regulator shut. And lastly, we come to the sound set, which, in my opinion, hasn't aged all that well. For one thing, the DNLG consolidation still has that annoying and constant flange squeal on the curves, even when she isn't speeding. And she also has that same recycled Penske K4 whistle, albeit with a higher pitch for whatever reason. To be fair, the bell audio on the backdated DNLG variant seems to be smoother than how it is on the B4D from Clear Creek Narrow Gauge. As for the unpowered rolling stock that comes with the Clear Creek Oldtimer pack, there's a boxcar, refrigerated boxcar, also known as reefer, a little four-wheel caboose, or way car, a gondola wagon for transporting coal or gravel, baggage express mail coach, or BMX for short, a regular passenger coach, and an excursion coach that doesn't have a clerestory roof. It's worth noting that this lot uses the older link and pin couplers, so unfortunately, it's incompatible with the rolling stock from the base Clear Creek narrow gauge route. I'm pretty sure the CC&G stock uses Janey couplers, but don't quote me on that. Come to think of it, if you were going to do a parody of a Van Halen song rewritten to be about couplers, then the parody could be called Janey's Crying. The boxcar, reefer and gondola from Oldtimer are effectively smaller versions of their counterparts included with CC&G, while the clerestory roof passenger coach looks like it was straight up recycled from the CC&G pack and only had the decals changed. As for the way car, baggage mail express coach and excursion coach, I think these would have been new additions to TS Classic at the time of this add-on's release. Thinking back to the way car, this thing is giving me Railroads Online flashbacks again. And something I noticed was the presence of passenger view cameras only on the balconies at each end, and not for the interior as well. This is despite the presence of fully modelled interior details. Lastly, you also get 4 career mode scenarios with this pack, but they are listed as 6 scenarios in the in-game menu because one of them is split into 3 parts. That 3-parter scenario is focused on an excursion train going from Golden to Silver Plume, with breaks in the journey at Forks Creek and Dumont. The first scenario in the list involves a freight run from Lawson to Idaho Springs, with a stop to pick up wagons at Hoosac Mill. Another is a shunting turn at Black Hawk, on the branch line that diverges from the main line at Forks Creek and ultimately terminates at Central City. And the last scenario is a freight train going from Empire to Silver Plume, with a couple of stops to drop off wagons on the way. The scenarios range in duration from 30 minutes to 1 hour and 20 minutes. Before I forget, it's worth noting that, in real life, the Clear Creek route closed in 1948. But the Georgetown to Silver Plume section has since been restored and reopened as a heritage railway, known as the Georgetown Loop Railroad. The Clear Creek Old Timer Rolling Stock pack had an interesting concept, but I think the execution still leaves something to be desired, especially where the Consolidation locomotive's audio is concerned. Personally, I think the overall pack could have been improved by adding a Denver, Leadville and Gunnison locomotive that was new to the game, alongside the backdated B4D, instead of only adding that backdated variant of a locomotive that we already had. In a way, the CCO TRS pack feels like a predecessor to what the Train Sim World community would now know as gameplay packs. As it stands now, there's more new stock included with Clear Creek Old Timer than what I was initially thinking, but in my brutally honest opinion, the full price of 24 New Zealand dollars is still a bit too high for what you're getting. I'm not sure if I would recommend picking up the pack for yourself. Not at full price anyway. Don't get me wrong, the add-on is okay for what it is, but I feel that, when it comes to value for money at least, there are better add-ons available that fit the Colorado narrow gauge theme. In summary, I consider the Old Timer pack to be neither good nor bad, so I'll give it a 5 out of 10.